Hello guys, welcome back to another episode of That Child with Tegan. So this week I kind of wanted to discuss something that discuss something that had been on my mind for a while, and something that I've always struggled with in the sense of not feeling represented or welcomed or celebrated in a way, and that is sex. And even though it's a broad topic, I'm even cringing at myself talking about it, but not in the way that I don't like talking about it, in the way that I feel like people have such a stereotype around people with disabilities being sexual that I know when I put this on the internet, it's gonna cause a bit of a ruckus and a bit of a people are either gonna love it or they're gonna hate it. But at the end of the day, I think sex and sexuality is not educated well enough in any aspect of life, and regarding sexual relationships, sexual health, sex in general, how it works when you have a disability, how you have children, what are the options. That is just not taught well enough in schools or well enough online or well enough from people from different perspectives of different people. And especially when I was growing up as a disabled girl, I had no idea what to expect. I had no idea what to even think, because there's so many stereotypes around sex, but also sex when you're disabled. And let's just get into it, shall we? So I also put up a question box on my Instagram, and I got a few questions around, or not even just questions, but also people's assumptions around disability and sexuality when it comes to the both of them. And I found it quite interesting how society has created this perception around people with disabilities and sexuality. It's almost like a taboo subject. People are afraid to talk about it. People are unsure how to speak about it. And I do think in general, sex is a taboo subject, especially in Britain. And I do think we are quite prudish when it comes to discussing sex and the ins and outs. And that was a good little joke there. But we're just very prudish, we're very reserved, we're very to our stuff with everything. But I do think that the lack of communication and the lack of openness is what is causing more sexual harm than good, and more sexual unawareness. People don't understand nor are aware of the dangers that can go wrong when having sex, or not knowing enough about consent, or not knowing enough about sexual health, or even when it comes to the human anatomy. I don't remember one class ever talking to students about the human anatomy, but in a sexual way. It was always the biology, I don't even recall being taught the anatomy of genitalia, to be crude, but I don't remember ever being taught the names of anything or going into depth. The only lesson that I actually truly remember was when I was in year 6, and my teacher, she demonstrated how to insert a tampon. Obviously, she wasn't naked, she had underwear on. but she demonstrated like the position that you should sit in when you're on the toilet, or how you can do it when you're standing up, and she demonstrated how to do it. And even like, I know when students went home and they told their parents, some parents were very like against that whole idea of being so open and so demonstrative, is that the word, of how to do it. But actually that lesson was so vital to a lot of the girls in that class, because without seeing it visually how it's done, how else are you going to learn how to do it? Other than trial and error yourself and probably causing more pain. I think a lot of people are visual learners, and unless you're taught these things, how are you going to learn? And that's just my brain. But like, I think I also was raised by a mother that was very open about everything. There was no question that was out of bounds. There was no beating around the bush. There was no like, oh, we can't talk about that, because my mum's very open and very honest and very just, this is how it is. If I had any questions, she'd find an answer that was suitable for my age. But also, she just thinks, and I agree, I think it's better to teach children young and to not beat around the bush. Children from the age of like 3 and 4 should be able to at least know or understand what consent is. They should know where their private parts are. They should know who is allowed to touch them and who isn't. They should know the actual language of the anatomy and not like these little words that we give them. I think that should stop. It should just be, it is what it is, and that's how kids should be raised. And I know people have different opinions, but I do think when you're growing up and you're learning about your own body, it's a lot easier if you're taught about it from a young age and it's not seen as something taboo, or, oh, you can't call it a penis when you're out in public. Like, no, that's what it is. Like, I actually don't understand it. Like, if we gave it that name, then why wouldn't you call it that? It's like, it's just it's a bit strange. But I do think in Britain we are very like just British and reserved, and we don't like talking about sex a lot. The other lesson that I can actually remember was when I was in secondary school, and the people that don't know, I went to an all-girls school that was quite private education-esque. It wasn't a private school, but it was previously, so it still had that ethos. And I think it was like in year 9 we had a sexual health and sexual relationships class. And they had first of all, they had our teacher deliver the lesson, and it got to a point where she was so uncomfortable delivering the lesson that she left, and my friend basically took over the lesson and just said, well, we all kind of know what's going on, we all kind of have some awareness of sexual health and sexual relationships, so let's just have a group discussion. And we as a class spoke about what we would like in relationships, what we don't want in relationships, what a healthy relationship looks like, which I also think should be taught in schools. Children should be aware of what healthy relationships look like and what that consists of, because a lot of people might not be aware. A lot of people might see a relationship that they have at home or someone that they idolize and think that is the perfect relationship and that is what they are aiming for. But until children and students are made more aware of other types of relationships, they might not know exactly what they want. And looking back at that class And looking back at that class, first of all, we were only taught about the male and women heterosexual relationships. And that was one thing that we said in the class. We said, could you educate us on, why can't I think of the word? Homosexual relationships. Because basically, at all girls' school, a lot of the students were queer or lesbians or bisexual. So we wanted more education also on women relationships and sexual health with women and how that all works, because it's very different when you are sexual with a woman than you are a man regarding STDs, sexual health, and how it all works in general. And the teacher basically said she had no answers to any of our questions. She was only provided information on sexual health for heterosexual relationships, which again is another oversight of the government, because a lot of people in the UK are gay, queer, homosexual. So why wouldn't you teach kids from a young age? Well, not even from a young age, from an age where they are probably interested in sexual relationships, and a lot of them probably are questioning or experimenting or figuring it out. It's important that everyone has the right education to both, and that they understand the pros, the cons, the ins, the outs, the everything. And that was something that I wasn't provided when I was at school. And another thing that I definitely wasn't provided was sexual relationship regarding when you have a disability, or like, there's no representation regarding what it looks like to be in a relationship or have sex when you have a disability. And this was something that I kind of always secretly questioned in my head. I would think about how it was going to work, whether it was going to work, whether I was going to find someone that wanted to be with me in that way. How would it feel? How would I do it? How does it work? And it's quite hard when you have those questions and knowing who to ask and know. Because there isn't really anyone that you can ask those questions to other than probably another disabled person. But then again, not every disabled person is the same. Every disabled person is individual and their experiences are their own. So you can't always compare. But I always wanted someone that could just be so honest and just explain to me exactly how it is, just so that I was more aware of kind of my life ahead, because I didn't know what to expect. And that's probably the same for someone that doesn't have a disability. But for me, it was much more. I think for me, it was much more challenging because you're also then battling I don't even know what to call it, but like the body dysmorphia, the inner self ableism that you have in your head that you don't like, or you don't know how to appreciate your body when you're growing up, and you don't know how it's so hard to even put into words. But I think there's a lot of resentment regarding being disabled and figuring out your life, and disability definitely creates barriers, and especially in the way of relationships and building connections with people. And that was something that I always kind of had a wall up about. And and then I'll tell you a funny story. So my mum, as I said, is a very open person, and she's very open to talking about sex, open about bodies and how it works. And she's just always been very open with any question that I asked. And I remember this one evening we were sat down on the sofa, I was watching TV. She was reading a magazine from Cerebral Palsy Plus, which is a monthly magazine featuring people with cerebral palsy. And within this magazine, there was this lady that submitted a story about when she had sex with her husband. And the story basically, my mum was like, Tegan, pause the TV, you have to hear this. I'm like, oh gosh, okay. I'm probably like 15, 16, I don't know. But she read the story, and the story basically consists of because when you have cerebral palsy, your body is naturally very tight everywhere. And basically, this woman had sex with her husband, and she said that it was the most painful experience that she ever experienced because it would not fit. And no matter how much they tried, it was just getting worse, and it was getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And I think it got to a point where she had to get injections down there to make her loose enough so that they could get pregnant and she could have her children. But regarding sex, they didn't really have any intimate relations regularly because it was so painful. And my mum told me this, and she was just like, oh, so interesting, isn't it? And me and my little 16-year-old brain, I was like, well, it's over for me then, isn't it? It's over, because I'm not doing that. If that's what it's gonna be like, I'm not I'm not doing that. I'm really not. So that kind of scared me, because that was like my first representation of what my experience could be like, and that was the first time hearing anything similar to what I am like in that way. So after that, I was like, no, do you know what? I think I'm good. I think I'm just gonna die virgin because I don't want to go through that. And then I think I was probably overly quite quiet, and my mum caught on that I was fucking terrified by that story. But I think it is a common experience between some disabilities regarding tone and dystonia, because your muscles move involuntarily. That could happen, but like there are so many different treatment options that can reduce that other than getting a fucking injection. But I didn't know that at the time. Anyway, my mum basically said that the best thing to do is to not wait until you get to that experience, to start figuring it out before then. And I'm already cringing at myself, but it's true. She basically said that the best thing to do is, instead of waiting and dreading that experience and stressing yourself about it, is to start feel. How do I put this into words that I'm not gonna get fucking taken off the internet? But to start experimenting yourself and figuring out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what you like, what you don't like. 'Cause there are ways of being intimate without being penetrated. I really don't know what words I can use on the internet anymore, but I hope you get what I mean. And I think that's kind of the same for any woman. I think more so for people with disabilities, if you don't really know how your body is going to react or how your body isn't going to react. But it's a good thing for anyone to be able to know what they like and what they don't like. And again, that kind of brings me to some of the questions that I got off my Instagram. And to be honest, I think a lot of the questions that I got were about my personal sexual experiences. but I thought I would start at least the first episode of this topic with the education and the stereotypes around disabled people and sexuality. I think one thing that I would love to achieve in the future is to have a platform in which I could help educate people on like actual questions that they have around sex and people with disabilities having sex. It does happen, and people in society conditioned it to not be okay to talk about, and not even not okay, but it's such a taboo subject that when you do talk about it, you feel like you're being like unconscious unconsciously criticized, and everyone watching you because you're being loud about a topic that no one talks about. But if no one talks about it, then how are people going to understand it? And if no one talks about it, then how are people going to be educated about it? And especially, I think there's so much misconceptions around sex and around how it's educated and around how it's done in a healthy way, that the more people talk about it, the more people are more likely to change and to redefine how we use language around it and how we educate and how we speak about it. Because I was literally taught nothing. And when you're taught nothing, the only thing that you can do is to go to the internet, where the internet is full of lies, is full of performances, is full of misinformation, it's full of imagery that isn't representative of what sex or a healthy relationship or consent is actually like. And when you're learning how you think it should be done by watching all that, then it just creates this horrible pattern of and cycle of it all just going wrong. And I don't know, sex is a topic that always has really interested me, because I think it is more than just procreation, it's more than just doing it to have children, but it's not always understood in a way that both parties enjoy it. And I'm a very open person, and I love discussing things that really turn people's eyes and get people a bit riled up, because if we don't talk about it, then like why not? I just don't get it. But anyway, I enjoy creating that room for conversation because I just feel like it needs to be had. But then again, I did grow up with a mum that is just so open and so welcoming to all of this kind of stuff. My mum is like the person that everyone goes to have the chat with their kids, and like so many of my friends used to come to my mum and ask questions. They know that she'd be very factual, very open, very honest about it. So many of my friends had the birds and the bees chat with my mum. And I think when you're growing up with a parent that is just so open and not honest, it is really useful in the sense that you grow up kind of not deluded by all of the things that you see and hear online, especially in this generation and this time where AI is also involved. There's so many platforms online in which you can view relationships and interactions that are so toxic and misrepresented of any kind of healthy relationship or consensual relationship, it can be very dangerous. So I do think it is important to be honest and open, and there's a way that you can do it that is age appropriate. But I also think if you think about it in the way that it's gonna happen, and there's no point kind of waiting for them to get to a certain age before having that having that conversation, because a lot of teenagers and young teenagers are having sex, and if they're not being fed the education and knowledge behind it, then they will end up in sticky situations. So I think it's always good to have conversations and to not be scared of them. But I am going to do more episodes regarding sex, disability, and the stigma and stereotypes around it. As I said, a lot of the Instagram questions were around my sex experiences or life or my sexuality personally, which again, I didn't really mind answering, but I thought I'd test the waters with this video first to see how it goes. But I am annoyingly a really open book, and I do think it is important to share your experiences, especially when people like me didn't exist when I was young. Like I didn't have anyone online that I could watch that was like me, that was willing to have these conversations. So for that reason, I didn't really mind. I didn't mind speaking on it, because I do think it is really important. Obviously, I won't be telling you all of the details, but I will share as much as I can. And if you could take one thing from this video, I would just say to start having those conversations and to not be afraid of those conversations. Because I think a lot of the time as well, people are scared that the reaction is going to be, what's the word? People are scared that the reaction is going to be something negative, and a lot of the time people share the same curiosities. So you might as well just ask the question and see what the response is, because you might be wondering the same question. And then you can talk about it and share each other's experiences. So I think there's always room for conversation around the topic. And I'm definitely going to be filming more on these topics and my experiences and what I would like to change and learn. And there's actually someone that I met a few years ago. We did a TED Talk together, and she did her TED Talk on she did her TED Talk on sex, sexual health, sexual relationships, healthy relationships, and what that is like, or the conversation around it. And I would love to maybe get her on in future and have a really open and honest chat about it, because I find it very interesting, and to what everyone on the internet does as well. And hopefully this video doesn't get taken down. I tried very hard to keep my language very internet friendly, but who knows. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and definitely look forward to episode 2. And I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you next week for a very good video. Have a good one, guys.